Have you ever discovered that someone you thought you knew completely was leading a double life? What if that someone had 4 paws and a tail that could knock over furniture with its enthusiasm? The secret lives of those closest to us often reveal themselves in the most unexpected ways, teaching us that sometimes the heart is big enough to belong in more than one place. The first time Cooper realized his golden retriever was living a lie was on a Tuesday afternoon in October. The sun slanted through the maple trees that lined Oak Street, casting dappled shadows across Cooper's keyboard as he worked. The breeze through the open window carried the scent of someone grilling a late lunch and Mrs. Abernathy's roses from next door. It was the kind of perfect fall day that made Cooper grateful for his decision to leave his cramped city apartment for this sleepy, suburban neighborhood with actual yards and neighbors who waved when you passed, and, of course, enough space for Baxter. Cooper glanced up from his laptop to check on his four-legged companion, expecting to see the golden retriever, sprawled on the front lawn where he'd been contentedly chewing a stick 20 minutes earlier. The lawn was empty. Baxter, Cooper called, not particularly concerned. The dog was probably just around the side of the house. No familiar jingling collar, no thundering paws racing back at the sound of his voice. Cooper stood, stretching his back after hours of hunching over spreadsheets. Baxter, he called again, louder this time. The unusual silence sent the first trickle of worry down Cooper's spine. Baxter wasn't a wanderer. Ever since Cooper had adopted him from the shelter 2 years ago, the dog had been almost comically devoted, following Cooper from room to room, as if perpetually afraid he might miss something important. Baxter. He called once more, now standing in the middle of his front yard, turning in a circle, scanning up and down the quiet street. Nothing. He headed back inside to grab his phone and Baxter's leash, trying to tamp down the rising panic. Baxter wore a collar with tags. He was muck-ripped. Someone would find him, call Cooper, everything would be fine. But as he stepped back outside, ready to begin a proper search, he noticed something that stopped him short. About a block down the street, a flash of familiar golden fur caught his eye. Baxter was trotting purposefully down the sidewalk, his tail held high and wagging slightly, like a furry flag signaling his intentions. Baxter, Cooper called, relief flooding his system. The dog's ears twitched, but remarkably, he didn't turn around. Instead, he picked up his pace, as if he hadn't heard Cooper at all. Now, that was weird. Cooper had seen Baxter wake from a dead sleep 3 rooms away at the quietest whisper of the word treat. There was no way he hadn't heard his name bellowed from half a block away. Curiosity replacing concern, Cooper followed at a distance, watching as his supposedly loyal companion navigated the neighborhood with surprising confidence. Baxter reached the corner, looked both ways, before crossing the street, then made a decisive left turn onto Elm Avenue. "What in the world are you up to?" Cooper muttered, maintaining his distance. Baxter continued his journey, occasionally pausing to sniff something interesting but never deviating from what was clearly a predetermined path. 3 blocks and 2 turns later, he approached a small blue house with a wide front porch. Without hesitation, Baxter bounded up the steps, sat down primly by the front door, and let out a polite, conversational woof. Cooper ducked behind a large oak tree, feeling ridiculous but strangely compelled to see how this mystery would unfold without his intervention. He was spying on his own dog, for heaven's sake. The blue door opened, and an elderly man with a crown of white hair and suspenders appeared. His weathered face broke into a smile that carved deep lines around his eyes. "Well, if it isn't my boy," the man exclaimed, his voice carrying across the quiet street. right on time today, aren't you?" Baxter's entire rear end was now wiggling with joy, his tail sweeping the porch in wide, ecstatic arcs. The man disappeared briefly inside, then returned with what looked suspiciously like a sandwich. He broke off a piece and held it out to Baxter, who took it with exquisite gentleness. "You know," the man said conversationally as Baxter chewed, "I made extra meatloaf last night, just for you. Your timing is perfect." Cooper stared in disbelief. His dog, his supposedly devoted companion, had a standing lunch date with a complete stranger. A secret social life Cooper knew nothing about. Unable to contain himself any longer, Cooper stepped out from behind the tree and approached the porch. "Excuse me?" he called, causing both Baxter and the elderly man to look up. Baxter had the good grace to look momentarily guilty before his tail resumed its joyful rotation. The man simply smiled wider. "Hello there," he said pleasantly. "You must be Baxter's person." I'm Cooper," he replied, slightly thrown by the man's complete lack of surprise. "And you are—" "Harold Finch," the man said, extending a hand. "But everyone calls me Hal. Baxter and I have been friends for, about 6 months now, I'd say." "6 months?" Cooper repeated, trying to keep the shock from his voice. Hal nodded, scratching Baxter behind the ears just the way Cooper knew he liked. "Showed up on my porch one day, looking mighty interested in the roast beef sandwich I was having. Been coming back ever since, usually around lunchtime, 3, maybe 4 times a week." Cooper stared at Baxter, who was now leaning blissfully into Hal's scratching fingers, eyes half closed in ecstasy. "I had no idea," he admitted. "Well now," Hal said with a chuckle, "dogs are allowed their secrets, same as people." He gestured to a rocking chair beside him. "Care to join us? Plenty of meatloaf to go around." Cooper hesitated only a moment before climbing the steps. Something about Hal's easy manner and the genuine affection he showed Baxter made it impossible to be upset. "I hope he hasn't been bothering you," Cooper said as he settled into the chair. Hal waved a dismissive hand. "Best part of my day, if I'm being honest. Been living alone since Martha passed 3 years ago. House gets quiet." He glanced down at Baxter, who had now settled comfortably between the two men, head swiveling occasionally to ensure both were still there. "Nice to have some company that doesn't expect me to keep up my end of the conversation all the time." Over the next hour, Cooper learned that Hal was a retired high school history teacher who'd lived in the neighborhood for 48 years. He'd raised 3 children in the Blue House, had 7 grandchildren scattered around the country, and made award-winning meatloaf. Secret is a touch of brown sugar and twice the recommended Worcestershire sauce, Hal confided, as if sharing state secrets. "I'll have to try that," Cooper said, though they both knew he probably wouldn't. "Listen, I should get going. And I should probably bring Baxter home with me." Hal nodded, though a shadow passed over his face. Course. He's your dog, after all." Cooper looked down at Baxter, who returned his gaze with those soulful brown eyes that had made Cooper adopt him in the first place. Then he glanced at Hal, seeing the same quiet loneliness there that had drawn him to the golden retriever at the shelter. "You know," Cooper said slowly, "I work from home most days. If it's all right with you, I don't see why Baxter couldn't continue his visits." Hal's face brightened. "That'd be mighty fine. The old boy is always welcome here. Maybe next time I could join you two for lunch," Cooper ventured. "Assuming you don't mind human company as well." "Been making too much food for one person for 3 years now," Hal replied with a smile. "Always room for one more at my table." As Cooper and Baxter walked home together that afternoon, Cooper couldn't help but marvel at his dog's secret diplomacy. In his quiet, golden way, Baxter had forged a connection Cooper would never have found on his own. Over the next few months, Tuesday and Thursday lunches at Hal's became a tradition. Cooper learned the stories behind each of the photos crowding Hal's mantelpiece. Hal discovered Cooper's embarrassing childhood nickname, Chicken Cooper, earned after an unfortunate incident with his grandfather's rooster. Baxter, of course, enjoyed the culinary benefits of their friendship, though Cooper insisted on contributing to the meals to prevent his dog from eating his weight in meatloaf. When winter arrived with unexpected ferocity, bringing the heaviest snowfall the town had seen in decades, Cooper insisted Hal stay with them until the sidewalks were cleared. One night turned into 3, which turned into Hal becoming a regular fixture at Cooper's house. With his own dedicated guest room that gradually accumulated a permanent collection of Hal's sweaters, books, and the special orthopedic pillow he claimed was the only reason he didn't wake up with a neck like a question mark. By spring, Cooper had built a ramp over the 3 steps leading up to his front porch for Baxter when he gets older. He claimed, though they all knew it was for Hal's knees on damp days. And when Cooper's company announced they were opening a new office in Chicago and wanted him to relocate, it was Hal who suggested the obvious solution. "That blue house has plenty of room for a young fellow like you," he said, as the 3 of them sat on Cooper's porch watching fireflies appear in the gathering twilight. "Got an office space that's just collecting dust. Martha always wanted someone to use it properly. I couldn't possibly," Cooper began. "Rent would be cheaper than that fancy apartment they're offering you," Hal continued, as if Cooper hadn't spoken. "And you'd be saving me from having to learn how to use the YouTube to figure out how to fix the dishwasher every time it makes that horrible grinding noise." Cooper looked at Baxter, who had positioned himself precisely between their 2 chairs, as had become his custom. The golden retriever returned his gaze with what Cooper could have sworn was a knowing expression. "You planned this all along, didn't you?" Cooper muttered to the dog. Baxter's tail thumped innocently against the porch boards. 6 months later, the residents of Oak Street had grown accustomed to the sight of an elderly man, a younger one, and a golden retriever taking their evening constitutional around the neighborhood. They'd become familiar with the sound of laughter drifting from the blue house, with its freshly painted shutters and the new flower boxes Cooper had built beneath the windows. And if anyone thought it strange how a wandering dog had created a family where there had been only solitude, they never said so. After all, as Hal frequently remarked, the heart, whether human or canine, has an infinite capacity for connection. Sometimes it just needs a golden retriever to lead the way. As for Baxter, he continued his neighborhood rounds, though now with Cooper's full knowledge, the ambassador of Oak Street, Hal called him, creating connections one unauthorized visit at a time. At night, Baxter still slept at the foot of Cooper's bed, but sometimes, when the house settled into its creaking slumber, he would quietly pad down the hallway to check on Hal, to ensure his expanded pack was safe and sound, and in the morning, he would wake them both with the same enthusiastic optimism, secure in the knowledge that his secret mission, now not so secret after all, had been an unqualified success.